Is Hell Let Loose a milsim? Well, there seems to be a bit of a divide in the community of people saying it is a milsim, or people saying it blatantly isn't, or it's like a mix in between the two. And for me, I think it's like a perfect balance of like a casual shooter mixed with like a milsim or a realistic shooter. It gives you that great blend where it's kind of easy to pick up and get into like a casual shooter, but it has a little bit more going on to it or with it with like a realistic shooter. So on one end of the spectrum, we could say we have the realistic or milsim games like Armor, Squad, Postscriptum, and at the other end of the spectrum are the casual games like Call of Duty or Battlefield. So what I'm going to do is take a look at the in-game mechanics for Hell Let Loose, and in my opinion, score it as to whether that mechanic is more like a realistic or milsim game or more like a casual game. And comment below when I go through these points I raised to let me know your opinion on them. Do you agree or disagree with what I say? But also, did you know that only 82% of you guys that watch my videos subscribe? So
do it!
So let's start with movement. With the first point in movement we're going to look at is inertia. So realistic or milsim games try to give your character like weight or presence, while more casual games, it can kind of feel like you're sprinting around on like super ice skates everywhere, sliding around and 360 prone in, jumping out of windows and just being mental. Now, one of the ways realistic games can do this is by giving your player model inertia while you're moving around. It pretty much means you can't quickly turn on a dime, especially when moving, and this can also affect when you're changing stances from standing up to going to crouch or prone. There's like a little bit of a delay or just like a little bit of a slowness to it. So Hell Let Loose, there is no inertia or weight to your character at all, so you can just quickly turn on a dime or 360 spin around with no issues. You can spam strafe, which isn't realistic at all. You can easily zigzag with no issues, and you can just super quickly change stances. So 1 point to casual. Next, we'll take a look at sprinting speed. Now, there has been a sprinting speed change recently in Hell Let Loose, a big topic of conversation and like controversy with the game. I've already made a little video comparing sprinting speed in Hell Let Loose to other sort of realistic and other games. But with this video, generally realistic games will have you sprint a bit slower than casual games because it's trying to represent the weight of your character and the weight of all the equipment that you carry around. And casual games, sort of like I said earlier, you can sprint around at super speeds with no issues, charging through doors without issues and windows and just fucking going mental. Now, Hell Let Loose, its recent speed change update has made you sprint a little bit faster. However, the Hell Let Loose sprint speed is still slower than realistic or milsim games like Armor Squad or Postscriptum. So because of this, a lot of people will disagree with this point, but I'm giving 1 point to realism. But before people go mental in the comments about, but Hell Let Loose has no stamina system. Well, we're going to look at stamina now, because stamina is a real thing in case you didn't know. You can't just get out of your Doritos crusted chair and sprint for like 1,000 meters with no issues at all. You're going to have a bit of a rest. Maybe drink some water to recuperate and recover your stamina. Thank you, Postscriptum. And casual games generally won't have a stamina system at all, so you can just sprint forever and ever and ever and ever
and ever and ever.
Hell Let Loose has no stamina system. 1 point to the casuals. Now let's take a look at vaulting. So similar to inertia, realistic games will take into account the general weight of the player character. You won't be, sprinting and zooming over objects with ease. If you're going to try and climb over something that's quite tall, like a wall, you'll have to pull yourself up, and it will be a bit of a slower animation because you're pulling yourself up while carrying all this equipment. While in casual games, you'll just be zooming over it with no problem at all. And when Hell Let Loose, you can vault any object you can reach with no speed penalty at all. You can even vault over tall objects like certain walls with no issues, and it doesn't even show like a climbing animation. It just shows the normal vault animation, which doesn't make sense at all. So that's casual vaulting, 1 point to casual door. Do you remember when Infinity Ward removed leaning from Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, the original Modern Warfare 2, because the game wasn't balanced for it?
What the fuck?
Yeah, in Hell Let Loose you can lean just like you can in real life, 1 point to realism. Now on to one of my favourite aspects about Hell Let Loose, the gunplay. First off, we're going to start with ammo management. Now, casual games, you have rounds that just magically top up the magazine that you're putting into your gun. You can fire 10 bullets and then just hit reload, and then 10 bullets appear into that magazine, and the rounds that were in that magazine you just took out magically go into like a magical pocket to magically go into all your other magical magazines.
Wow, how do you do that?
Oh, magic.
Then realistic games will have individual magazines that do not get magically topped up when you hit a reload button. The best game that probably represents this system is Squad, because it shows you how many magazines you have and roughly the current state of those magazines represented with a colour. Now Hell Let Loose, it has a magazine system for magazine weapons and individual rounds or stripper clips for bolt action rifles. So because of that, that is 1 point to realism. A weapon customization. Realistic games generally have no or very limited customization, because when you generally join the military, or I'm guessing because I haven't joined the military, you are given your weapon based on like your role or whatever. In casual games, you can pretty much choose whatever you want, even if you're playing a World War II based game and you're playing for, say, the American Army, and you can just choose any Japanese weapon, any British weapon or German weapon or weapon that wasn't even used in World War II, and then you can heavily customize it. For example, Hell Let Loose has no weapon customization, so 1 point to realism. Now, weapon availability, I briefly just mentioned this actually, but casual games, they will let you choose any weapon from any force that you can play as in the game. But realistic games will limit you to what's actually available for your current faction, or won't let you choose a different weapon at all. Hell Let Loose, you can only use the weapons that are available for that faction. There is a different conversation to be had about whether that weapon was actually available during that time period that the battle you're in took place, but because you can only use the weapons from your current faction, I'm giving 1 point to realism. So casual games, it takes multiple shots to kill someone, and headshots with non-sniper rifles are not like a one-shot kill. There's no issues with really getting hit, there's no after effects, you don't get any sort of slowdown, or there's a very lack of a suppression effect, or there's no sort of bleeding, which is meant to represent when you get shot, you know, bleed. And a lot of casual games have a big damage drop off, where the further away a target is, the bullet magically starts to do a lot less damage. And generally there's a lack of recoil. Now realistic games, generally I find they're 1 to 2 shots to kill, headshots with any weapon or an instant death. You have bleeding to represent that you've been wounded, and there's low damage drop off, so your weapon will be still lethal at long ranges because you're still, shooting someone. And generally there will be higher recoil in realistic games, even if that recoil is like too much when comparing the in-game recoil to real life, but it is just trying to represent that, it is like a weighty, beefy, damage dealing weapon that you're using, and you can easily counter or control that recoil with mouse movement, just like in real life you would control that weapon recoil with pushing into the recoil with your body weight and controlling it with your hands and arms. I've never shot an automatic rifle before. I've only ever shot 2 different types of shotguns, a pump shotgun and a double barrel over-under hunting shotgun. So, don't take my word for it on how to control automatic weapons because I haven't shot one yet. But for Hell Let Loose, I would say it fits into the realistic category. Now, arguments can be made against Hell Let Loose because different weapons using the same caliber of rounds do different damage. For example, the M1 Garand and the BAR. The M1 Garand is a one-shot kill to the chest up to 200 meters, while the BAR is only a one-shot kill to the chest up to 100 meters. And shots below the knee magically half the damage output, and bullets going through things like wood magically do exactly like half the damage output as well. And there's certain bolt action rifles where you put a scope onto it, such as the Kar 98 Mosin and the P14 Enfield. They magically transform from being a one-shot kill to the chest up to 200 meters to being a one-shot kill to the chest at infinite range, or really it's up to 500 meters because that's how far away enemy soldiers will actually render in the game. But I would still say that Hell Let Loose is still closer to being a realistic shooter in terms of its damage output. So 1 point to realism. Now, what I mean by weapon movement is in casual games, when you're just looking around, your weapon sticks to the center of your screen. So when you're looking left and right, your character model will be completely turning. But if you was holding a gun and you wanted to look left a bit, you wouldn't turn your whole body. You would probably just twist at the waist a little bit, or literally just move your arms a little bit. If we take a look at realistic games like Squad or Postscriptum, when you start moving your mouse around a little bit, you can see there's almost like a little dead zone. I'm not sure what the proper term for it is, but your weapon is just moving independently of your character model, and that represents pretty much exactly how you would probably use a weapon in real life. And let's take a look at Hell Let Loose, and it doesn't work like that at all. It is just completely stuck in the center of your screen like casual shooters. So I'm giving 1 point to the casuals. Now, buildings and fortifications, generally casual games will have no building or fortification system. But if we look at Battlefield 5, they did implement the fortification system, as they called it, where you can build in preset locations or sort of repair destroyed buildings by starting to put sandbags and stuff to where the walls used to be. But in Battlefield 5, you have no requirements of what you need to build something. You just go to that area and start building. There's no materials or supplies needed. Now, in realistic games, generally there is some sort of a supply system to represent supplies and weapons and ammo being moved from, let's say, HQ to the front lines, whether that's represented in individual types of materials or just a generic supplies and ammo. Now, if we look at Squad and Postscriptum, the more realistic games, yes, there is a supply system, and Squad there is an ammo system as well, where you have to move ammo from your HQ to your frontline bases so people can resupply on ammo. Now, Hell Let Loose, it does have a supply system. You can get supplies from your base in a truck and bring them forward. You can airdrop supplies. The support class carry supplies that can just drop them down as and when they're needed. And there is a resource system based around resource nodes, which is kind of like an RTS game where you build a little building and it generates certain resources. And I think that's meant to represent the movement of supplies and ammo, munitions and stuff from, let's say, a HQ to the more forward frontline bases. It is heavily inspired by RTS games, but because it has this sort of system, I'm going to give Hell Let Loose 1 point to realism. In casual games, tanks can be quite zippy and agile, quickly turning their turrets around to attack any target they need to. They probably have one tank shell type which can just kill infantry and have a large area of effect, just like it does the same amount of damage to tanks. And generally, angle of shots on enemy tanks won't matter, it'll just do straight damage, and it might do less damage to front armor and more damage to rear armor. Now, realistic games, they will have an accurate movement based on the tank. They might slow it down or maybe just speed it up a little bit based on gameplay. The turrets may turn slow or actually accurately turn based on what that tank can actually do. There'll be multiple tank shell types. The angle of the tank shot against an enemy armored target will matter. Tank armor all around will sort of matter as well, and it has varying levels of protection based on what that tank actually was like. And you can probably one-shot enemy tanks if you penetrate the tank at the right target, which will result in like hitting the ammo rack in the tank, which will just explode it. Now, Hell Let Loose, I would say it is closer to realism. The angle of shot does matter a little bit, but the tank system is a little bit more simplistic. It's not full realism. Like a lot of things in Hell Let Loose, it is like a bit of a blend, but I think because of how tanks work, I would put it like one bit closer to realism, so I am going to give 1 point to realism on this. In casual games, you'll be able to customize your character in many ways, because generally casual games are made by the big companies who want microtransactions dumped in their game to make loads of money from them. If you look at Battlefield, Call of Duty, there's tons of cosmetic microtransactions in them. And in those games, you can customize your character to a very like massive degree. Call of Duty probably isn't the best example of this because it's not like a set army you play as, but if you look at Battlefield 5 and you look at the customization you can do in Battlefield 5, there is a massive degree of customization you can do. You can even dress up as like a sailor on the front lines, which doesn't make sense at all really. But with Hell Let Loose, the cosmetics, I believe, are accurate to World War II. Some people may argue that the frog trooper camo wasn't used on the Western Front, where it was by like a certain engineer division or something, so it was actually used. And a big argument can and will be made against the current winter camo for the US Army, because that just didn't exist. They didn't have white clothes. The American Army didn't in World War II. But because the cosmetics that are available for Hell Let Loose are generally accurate, I'm going to give 1 point to realism. Now, I can't think of many other things to compare between like Hell Let Loose and other games to see what's casual and realistic. You could talk about the maps, where some of the maps aren't historically accurate, but that's not like realism. You can have a realistic game with no historically accurate or location accurate maps. It still would be like a realistic game. Like Armor uses loads of fictional locations. You could look at the medic system, where you can easily just revive someone with a needle and put a bandage on them, then they're good to go. But there's really no game out there that accurately represents what it's like getting shot and dying, because if you died in a game that was probably realistic, that's your game over. You wouldn't be able to like play anymore. No game does that, I think, like on a large scale shooter. So I'm not going to mark up the medic system. There's also the repairing system for the tanks. It is a really casual system and Hell Let Loose. You just take a blowtorch, walk up to a tank and use it, and it magically repairs it. But I think there's no sort of game out there that accurately reflects what repairing a tank would be like, because you can't just, magically fix up damaged armor and replace parts in the middle of a game like this. Even if you go back to base, you'll probably go back to base and then you're done for the game, because it's going to take a lot of time to repair a tank. So I'm not going to talk about repairing tanks. And yeah, I could go into more detail with the things I've already discussed, or pick apart other features and mechanics in Hell Let Loose to try and score it up in this little system I've come up with. But really, the whole point of this video is to get across that Hell Let Loose is not a milsim. It is not a casual shooter. It takes elements from both types of shooters and smushes them together, and I think it smushes them in a really good way, because I think the blend Hell Let Loose has made is what makes the game so good, or one of the things that makes it so good. It's not overly complex or so hardcore that it really pushes a lot of people away, and it's not super casual that it pushes fans of more tactical and hardcore shooters away. It has that great blend. And I think for people that want to get into more hardcore tactical shooters, especially large scale ones, Hell Let Loose is a fantastic entry point to that genre. So let me know what you think of this video down in the comments below. Let's get some discussions going. Give the video a like if you liked it, a dislike if you didn't. If you'd like to support the channel further, then consider becoming a member or joining the Patreon. Subscribe for more, and thank you for watching.